Furries are defined as an enthusiast for animal characters with human characteristics, in particular, a person who dresses up in costume as such a character or uses one as an avatar online. Oxford Dictionaries. The history of anthropomorphic animals as a concept has been in humanity's stories for decades, commonly portrayed as mythical creatures or gods, goddesses in various civilizations. Anthropomorphism, from the Greek anthropos, lit. Human, and morphe, lit. Form, or shape, is the attribution of human characteristics to non-human entities, such as objects or animals, and can be found in the earliest examples of human art. The Lowenmensch figurine dates as early as the Upper Paleolithic period, or around 35,000 years ago, and is the oldest known work of figurative art. The Tale of Two Brothers, circa 1200 BC, is one of the earliest known examples of transformation, with the god Bada turning into a bull. Hesiod's Works and Days, circa 700 BC, features a fable known as the Hawk and the Nightingale and is an early example of a parable. The story was expanded upon in Aesop's Fables, circa 550 BC. Editor's note: while the previous examples are commonly attributed to the furry fandom's growth and emergence prior to the modern age, these follow more closely to the behaviors and mindset of quadrobers, more specifically, Otherkin, group that the fandom has largely proclaimed itself to be separate from. In 1890, Palmer Cox wrote Funny Animals, which is the earliest known use of the term furry concerning anthropomorphic animals. The novels of Felix Salten, published between 1926 and 1945, established the precedence of what would later be called furry fiction. The most famous example of these books is Bambi. Somewhat more relaxed attitudes towards art and experimentation in the 1960s and early 1970s saw the use of controversial concepts in fantasy animal stories become more common, such as explicit content and sexualized characters, attracting increased interest from older fans, the most notable example being Fritz the Cat. Robert Crumb's dissatisfaction with the film adaptation of Fritz the Cat led to him subsequently killing off the character in 1972. After this, there was a lack of funny animal characters outside of mainstream houses such as Disney. Minneapolis artists Ken Fletcher and Reed Waller, hoping to fill a void surrounded by comic book superheroes, decided to found an amateur press association, or APA, called VUTI on February 29, 1976. The intention was to gather talented artists in Minnesota and explore the potential of using furry animals in adult situations. The furry fandom officially found its roots in the underground comics movement of the 1970s, a genre of comic books that depict explicit content. In 1976, a pair of cartoonists created the Amateur Press Association, VUTI, which was dedicated to animal-focused art. Many of its featured works contained adult themes, such as Omaha, the Cat Dancer, which contained explicit sex, with the original writer commenting, he began developing the concept for Omaha, the Cat Dancer after one of the magazine's contributors said that there was not enough sex in the genre. VUTI grew a small following over the next several years due to the exotic content, and its contributors began meeting at science fiction and comics conventions. By the early 1980s, VUTI's membership contributions had become increasingly sporadic, and editorial laxness was just as apparent. Timothy Fay would attempt to keep the group alive by creating his own APA, Revolutionary VUTI, in 1983 with the help of Mark Schurmeister. Although they received some submissions, they needed more interest. VUTI's cessation that year led to Schurmeister founding another APA, Rohrbrazil, soon afterward. This transition between VUTI and Rohrbrazil is considered by Patton, a fandom historian, to be a crucial evolutionary point between funny animal fandom and furry fandom. Judy Niver, one of the founders of the CFO, cartoon, fantasy organization, hosted a party in her room at the San Diego Comic Convention in 1985. The Rohrbrazil APA group was also having a party in the same hotel, and there was much overlap in attendance. As a result, it became a tradition to have at least one furry party during the convention. In more recent years, the Comic-Con party has been called CritterCon Diego and Califor Diego. By 1988, the furry parties at West Coast conventions such as San Diego Comic-Con and WesterCon had grown immensely, to the point where even double suites were too small. Merlino and O'Reilly, encouraged by the large attendance, decided to expand on the furry party concept and host a prototype convention for furry fans. Conference Zero was hosted in Costa Mesa, California, on January 21 to 22, 1989. In July 1997, Albany Anthrocon was first held in Albany, New York, later becoming Anthrocon, which would continue to grow into the largest convention in the modern day. Virtual environments, such as MUCs, online role-playing games, soon became the most popular places on the net for furry fans to meet and communicate. One of the oldest and largest MUCs in existence is Furry MUC. One of the newest virtual environments to attract furry fans is Second Life, which would later be involved in neo-Nazi activity connected to the furry community. The first Usenet, chatroom, newsgroups began to appear in the early 1990s. Alt.fan. Furry was created in late 1990 and eventually spawned several additional newsgroups, such as Alt. Lifestyle. Furry, which was created in 1996. FurryNet, an unofficial Usenet hierarchy of fur newsgroups which was created in the late 1990s. In 2000, there was an unsuccessful attempt to create Rec. Arts. Furry, which would have brought furry fandom into the primary Usenet hierarchy, failing by only 8 votes. In the late 1990s, David J. Rust, aka Sylvan, attempted to document the internal social dynamics and trends within furry fandom. While originally intended to be a fan film documentary, the research he conducted from 1996-1997 was eventually collated into the Sociology of Furry Fandom, a subculture study, the first academic study of furry sociology. A schism that had been developing in the fandom for some time had reached a boiling point in the aftermath of Conference 8, which quickly became notorious for a variety of sexualized incidents. Previous years had seen several similar incidents. Complaints about poor public behavior were repeatedly brought to the convention's staff to be addressed. As a rule, however, these complaints were ignored, with the result that the offended parties began airing their grievances in such forums as Alt.fan. Furry. Backlash emerged from various groups who either mocked the complaints or defended those engaging in offensive behavior. Accusations of religious intolerance and puritanism were often directed at the complainers. This led to the creation of the Burned Furs and, in response, the Freezing Furs, sparking a flame war about the increasing public display of fetishes in the fandom. The Burned Furs argued that such matters should remain private, while their opponents defended open sexuality or claimed burned furs were only attracting bad press. To date, the only mentions of freezing furs have only come from their opposition's complaints in interviews. Alongside this, a small group called Furry Peace advocated for tolerance but largely stayed out of the conflict. Meanwhile, numerous other furry conventions had been springing up already, several in direct response to the mismanagement of conference before CF10. Almost universally, these adopted specific and stringent public behavior policies, leading to a sharp drop in incidents of public sexualization at furry conventions. This, in turn, slowly turned around the fandom's press image by making these incidents into old news. The poor press continued on the fringe from time to time. As with MTV's Sex 2K special, as well as certain TV episodes of CSI and Saint Elsewhere. But the mainstream image of furries slowly began to be replaced with news coverage of furry conventions where the most interesting thing to film were fursuit parades. In 1999, at the North American Science Fiction Convention in Anaheim, California, the Furry Fandom Lounge reflected on 15 years of fandom. That year also saw the launch of further confusion in the Bay Area of San Francisco, California, which eventually became the second largest furry convention in the world. Furry conventions exploded in the 2000s, with over 30 cons starting up, so far. In comparison, the 1990s saw 13 cons, with all but 2 of them continuing after 1995.